EOU, post-war Europe. This week I'm going to give us a lighter week. No quizzes, no tests, no papers, nothing. I'll give you a light week this week. We're just going to read 2 chapters from Jute, chapter 14 and 15, and in our discussion for the week. And I've left the discussion kind of wide open to sort of let you take the discussion the route you want to take it based on this week's presentation and on the readings. This week we have a pretty interesting topic. We're in one part in chapter 15 of Jute, we're reading about the transformation in politics during the 1970s, the emergence of new types of political actors and groups, new types of political movements, different issues, and so forth, which is itself very interesting. And then also we are going to look at the emergence of a, if you will, terrorism crisis across Europe during the 1970s. This week we are dealing primarily with the 70s, transformation in politics in Europe during the 70s, as well as the emergence of a terrorism crisis in the 1970s across Europe. There really was a quite extensive amount of really terrorism in Europe during the 1970s, and this extended from the United Kingdom and Ireland, with the Troubles, the conflicts being fought over Northern Ireland, to really anarchist gangs like the Baader-Meinhof gang in Germany, which conducted numerous bombings and attacks, robberies, to the Italian Red Brigades, separatist groups like the ETA movement in Spain, which sought to separate the Basque region of Spain from the main government, and other groups. Spillover violence from the Palestine-Israeli conflict, which of course surfaced most with the Munich Olympics attack of 1972. So we're going to be looking at these different types of, if you will, terror wars and the ramifications that these have in different countries in Europe. How do they affect Europe? How do some of these different cases differ, and so forth. And so I think it's a pretty interesting week where we're talking about some issues that should start to really sound, I mean, many of them, even though it's Europe, a lot of these types of issues should start to sound pretty familiar to some of you. And I think it's in the case of some of these readings and some of these issues that we discuss, I think that you can see a certain degree of parallel across the Atlantic with the United States, both when we see aspects of the emergence of the New Left, when we see some real transformations in political movements and in political issues in the 1970s, and of course also with the emergence of increasing terrorist violence, which in the United States as well led the United States to really begin at least a transformation of its approach to dealing with the foreign policy issue of terrorism. And we really see that approach further reformed even further in the 1980s under the Reagan administration, which really established the Cold War roots for the modern war on terrorism in some respects. I guess that's about it. The factoid for this week. So read chapter 14 and 15 for Jute. We're talking about the 1970s this week. We only have the graded discussion forum this week. Remember, post first on Thursday. And post a reply is fine. Just be active. Just be active. No later than Thursday. It's the same reason I want you watching these announcements before Wednesday. I want you thinking about the class, being active in the class early, because it's just better for us in how we learn in an online classroom. So just participate in the discussion no later than Thursday. Make sure you also have a total of 1 post, 2 replies over 2 separate days during the week. And I think we do have some really interesting topics this week and coming ahead in the coming weeks, as well as we kind of move up to ultimately some discussions towards the end of the class that are a little bit more about drawing these historical connections to the present. So this is the factoid for this week. The factoid for this week is this. Of course, this is a bit of oral history. This is a bit of personal family history. So I would say that without question, the most devastating cases of the so-called terror wars, and I'm calling them the terror wars, if you will, or the terrorism crisis, in Europe during the 1970s was, I would say, almost unquestionably the war over Northern Ireland, fought by the group, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, and the Ulsterite groups, as well as the British government, fighting over Northern Ireland as the IRA sought to push the British out of Northern Ireland and to force its reunification with the Republic of Ireland. And of course, this made Belfast and much of the area of Ulster a very, very violent place and a very dangerous place, particularly so in the 1970s, though it didn't go away in the 80s. And we saw other cases of very serious violence throughout the 1980s. And we look at the type of terror violence, it was pretty widespread. We have cases of street killings, bombings, and even attempted assassinations, as there was one IRA attempt to assassinate the prime minister. But the Troubles, as they were called, took a great toll on people's lives. And I believe the statistic is something like 1 in 5 families in Ulster, in Northern Ireland, knew somebody that had been killed in the Troubles, the battle between the IRA and Ulsterite groups in Northern Ireland over Northern Ireland. And so the factoid is this, bit of oral history. I am the first of my generation born in the United States. My grandfather was English on my mother's side, and my grandmother was Scottish from Edinburgh, and then I have family in Northern Ireland. And interestingly, my second cousin was an individual named Ian Paisley, and Ian Paisley was a preacher and a politician from the House of Ulster in Northern Ireland during this period. In fact, he was a long-term member of Parliament into the 90s. He died recently, just a few years ago. And Ian Paisley, so he was a Ulsterite member of Parliament. He was a preacher, and at the height of the Troubles, he would have been one of the voices, sort of support of Protestant Ulsterite groups. And so I am related to Ian Paisley. Ian Paisley is my second cousin. And so, the Troubles is kind of very close to my family in this respect. And we used to receive, until Ian died, we used to receive postcards or pictures around Christmas, of the family with, Ian usually pictured in the front and center of the shot. Ian, who was my grandmother's sister's son from Northern Ireland, from Ulster. Interestingly, in the United States, I was born in the United States, and one of my best friends is Irish Catholic, and his also the first of his generation, and his father was Irish Catholic, born in Ireland, and so the Troubles were very, very close to that family as well. And interestingly, in the United States, having been born here myself, and of course my best friend having been born here, and his father being Irish, in the United States, we never knew any discord. There was never any reason for us not to all be like the best of friends, and it never ever was any thought. And it was kind of, in my eyes, sort of like the great thing about America is that, in a lot of respects, America is the place where we can set aside differences that maybe in the old world would have been, if you had grown up there, would have been much more powerful differences. And in the United States, an Irish Catholic family and a family with roots in Ulster Protestantism could be in the United States, and none of that really mattered or was even worth a thought, and you could be the closest friends. And I was very, very close with James's. His name's James. I was very, very close with his father. His father's passed, but I was very, very close with him. And there was one time where there was a family gathering, and all the family came over from Ireland, and it was we had a bit of a good time, sort of, you know, commenting on that very fact that that we could be the best of friends and it didn't matter in the United States, so to speak. My uncle, by the way, who's passed now as well, and this was something that the side of the family that was closer to Ian Paisley would have very much not liked. My uncle was he married an Irish Catholic woman, and ultimately moved to the Republic of Ireland and was buried in the Republic of Ireland. And the older family in the old world, the Ian Paisley side of the family, would have had a great deal of difficulty with that because of the nature of the divide between Ulsterites, Protestant Ulsterites in Northern Ireland, and Irish Catholics from the Republic of Ireland. This was a very bloody and devastating conflict. In the Sunday Bloody Massacre, the Bloody Sunday Massacre in 1972, you had British forces kill some 13 people. There were numerous bombings, and so anyway, the factoid is that I'm related to Ian Paisley. See, look, I went on 12 minutes, and I know you guys probably don't want to listen to me for 12 minutes, but that was a little piece of just oral family history. Second cousin, I believe it is, to Ian Paisley, who was very much sort of at the core in a political way of the troubles in Northern Ireland,